Welcome back to Solar Systems, where we help you understand the system your soul goes into. And today we're going to be talking about your Mars placement. When talking about your Mars placement, we have to break down a couple of things. But before we get into that, a little introduction. With your Mars actually being placed in Libra, Mars fucking hates Libra. But that doesn't mean you have to. And actually you can learn quite easily to work with it and work your way around it, right? But before we get into all that, let's actually break down Mars in an individual standpoint as well as Libra. So Mars, right? Mars is the planet of action, willpower, aggression, motivation, as well as your intentions, right? This is your aggressive energy, this is your motivation energy, this is your energy to actually do something, you know what I'm saying? Now I know that sounded a little bit like pinching a loaf, however, that's essentially what Mars does, right? It's that energy. Now, with that being the case, Mars is associated with Aries as well as Scorpio, right? But more so Aries. So with that being the case, if you actually look at a zodiac wheel over here, you may notice that Aries directly opposes Libra. So with Aries being the energy that Mars is naturally at home in, Libra is the energy that Mars is not at home in. You know what I'm saying? This is basically the energy where Mars likes to go to work, do what it has to do to get the job done with the tools that it has at its disposal. It doesn't necessarily mean it likes it or enjoys this energy, it just means that it utilizes it. So essentially, with this energy, let's get into Libra, right? Now, Libra is the energy of relationships, relating to one another. Libra is the cardinal air sign, and it is correlated to initiating and creating new ways of thinking and communicating. So with this being the sign of being adaptable to relationships, because it can always create an individual energy for you, this means that Libra is always waiting on and trying to find balance with other people, right? This is the energy that was born from the 7th house, the house of relationships, essentially your hip chakra, or the chakra correlated to your hips, right? The point that is basically the horizon on your internal scales, where you basically separate and draw the line between your lower chakras and your higher chakras. So when actually talking about Mars in Libra, this energy is typically seen as the dynamic duo, or you're always found every time you have a sporadic moment of intention or a moment of actualizing a thought that you want to experience, aka you're motivated for something that you really want to do right now. Whenever this is placed in Libra, this essentially focuses you on finding someone that you can actually deal with, or finding someone you can relate this idea to. Because with Mars in Libra, or any Mars in 7th house adjacent energy, this is basically pushing you to seek out someone else to experience this with, because 2 is always better than 1, and that's essentially the energy you're rocking with, even if it is in your subconscious and you're not typically looking and going out of your way to do this on a daily basis. So with this being the case, Mars in Libra will always position you to need a buddy in some sort, whether that is a person, place, or thing. Remember, when you're in a relationship or you're seeking out a relationship, anything that you can relate to, so putting this in the noun space, quote unquote, is basically what you're going to be seeking out. So essentially, having Mars in Libra is always going to push you to need an external means of support to actually experience something. Not to say that you can't do things out on your own, however, you will find yourself really experiencing almost everything with a counterpart, a balance, a counterweight, something to actually put you in the space of having someone to share it with. But you typically have a partner in crime, once again, whether that is a person, place, or thing. So with that being the case, we mentioned in the beginning of this video that we will help you work with that and find a way around it, because you know Mars doesn't want to find a way around it. Mars wants to bash straight through it and actually dissipate all of that energy regardless of what you're going through at the moment. So being that is the case, you may be experiencing a little bit of aggression and anger at yourself anytime you do feel a limitation or a blockage regarding you needing to find some type of external source of stability whenever you're working towards something. So you may be flip-flopping and a little aggressive with yourself when actually dealing with this. Now what I mean by that is you're going to need a point to do something, and you're going to not want a certain reference point to do this thing. I know that's a little broad, but what I mean by that is you basically just want somebody to be with you all the time, and not hand-holding, but just someone there to know that someone's there. And with this being the lens that your Mars energy is looking through, Mars is always pissed off that it actually has to do this. So this can boil down to you being a little passive-aggressive to people, or you being very energized around people to distract them from your passive-aggressiveness, or you just point-blank period wanting someone to be there and holding a lot of this internal anger at yourself because you feel as though you need somebody to do something with. So this may be a clusterfuck of an energy for you, however, it doesn't have to be. This energy is basically your own internal base, your own internal energies, your own tools that you use that just don't like what they have. They don't like the tools that have been given to them. So they may take it out on you in a way. It isn't all that bad, it isn't all that good, but the important thing is you need to recognize it and nip that shit in the bud if you have something to do. Because Mars in Libra can hold you back in that way by just you feeling like you need somebody else, right? Or you not having somebody else and being all hurt and a little bit sad. You're like, oh damn, I'm not doing as good as I could. I don't have the best support system that I may have wanted to actually go out and experience this. I know I can do it. I know I want to do it. And I know I will do it. However, it's like a problem child that hasn't had their own time to actually go out and experience the world on their own. So they have so much drive, they have so much yearn, they have so much energy and desire to do so. However, once they do, they kind of come running back to mommy and going back into the same cycle over and over and over again because they weren't necessarily prepared with the tools of experiencing that individuality and the responsibilities that come with it. Now, if we dive into what this actually looks like a little further, you'll remember that I mentioned the noun idea, right? So with this being a person, place, or thing that you relate to whenever you find something new that you want to experience, any type of intention or drive that you have to do, you unintentionally set out to kind of go for it for a long time, because when you have Mars placed in Libra, the Libra energy wants to make this a schedule or a routine, something that you can consistently bring comfort to yourself. So in a weird way, your motivations are something that you use to consistently bring comfort to yourself. So with that being the case, anytime you do something, for instance, even if it is lunch, you want to have lunch at the same space, the same table. If you have a spot, you have a spot. You're motivated to do exactly this because that's what you're relating to, and at the end of the day, your motivations are sort of seen as something that makes you feel comfortable, right? Something you actually get pleasure out of. Not pleasure like that, but pleasure in the sense that you enjoy and you like doing these things, right? Because sometimes setting out and doing new things can be a little uncomfortable, but as long as you have a buddy, you'll be good. Now, another thing about Mars and Libra people is they really, really enjoy actually being some type of matchmaker in a way. They may not like to admit it, they may not like to show it, and it may not directly be in the sense of a love and relationships type of match, but they love putting different people together. They love creating groups. They love creating new little relationships regarding people, even if it's in business or just friendship. They love just putting people together. Now, this also kind of depends on the house. However, the energy will make you focus on that. But another thing that this energy may focus you on is interpersonal relationships and how people sort of deal with each other. This is a little bit of a sociology aspect where it just kind of hyper-focuses you on relationships. Mars and your motivations are always looking at the relationship signs. So when you're actually picking and choosing what you want to relate with, you kind of go back and forth, because what sort of holds you back from acting on your intentions in the immediate sense is your motivations are always paused until you actually find something that you can relate to, right? Because what this is and what this has you doing is you're essentially externalizing your motivations. So you don't really play around with your motivations, and you may have learned this the hard way depending on your situation and your experience with this. So with this being the case, you're always testing, trying out new people, trying out new things, trying to see what works best. Because at the end of the day, Libra is always focused on balance and is typically the sign of indecision. So even if you do find something good, if it doesn't make you feel comfortable and it's just practical, well, it may have ticked certain boxes, but it certainly hasn't ticked others. So this is why when you're actually seeking and going out and trying to find these different spaces, places, and people to place as the steward of your intentions and motivations, you have a lot to go over and a lot to deal with regarding trying to find the people that actually help with your relationships. So this is why you've sort of become an expert in sociology and interpersonal relationships regarding this sign, because you have such a high regard for where you're placing and who stewards your intentions, right? So with this being the case, depending on how much you actually care about something will dictate the level of study and scrutiny you may put in a certain person, regardless of if they know it or not. Now, before we actually close this out and give a little review on what we learned, let's actually break down and talk about this one last thing. So Mars in Libra and its levels of lamentation. So you know the drill. You always know you're going through this, especially early on when you're actually learning this energy of, should I do it? Should I not? Is it a good idea? Will people like me if I have it? Do people see me in the same light if I actually went for this? Is this something that I want to do? Do I have a team around me? Do I have people supporting me? Maybe not necessarily always a support team, but, you know, people around you that would actually be interested and curious and maybe have some ideas that they can bounce off with when you're actually experiencing this, right? A Mars in Libra wishes this was the age of mentorship and apprenticeship, essentially, which is, especially in the business world, why they always kind of find themselves with a mentor or a teaching person in some type of capacity. Now, what you can do about this is you can bring it back to the whole point of relationships, where it actually deals with a noun, where you don't necessarily want to have an imaginary friend or a pet rock or a parrot on your shoulder saying, "You got it, you got it, you got it, keep going, boss, keep going, boss," and something like that. But you really want to have a person or a YouTube person or maybe some morning affirmations or something to that degree, where you don't always necessarily need a mentor or external person, but you also have a external support system that isn't exactly you talking to yourself, but someone that you can look up every day and just say, "I got this." And you always have that person to relate and see as a support mechanism to. This doesn't necessarily have to be a YouTube person, but a consistent person that is supporting you in a broad sense and not for each individual specific intention. You can have a pet, you can have a piece of paper, you can have just a lucky something that says like, I got this, I can do it, you know? It's something that you're always relating to on the experience. So without further ado, let's get back into the review and I'll meet you on the masterclass chair. So now that we've gotten through the bulk of it, we actually made it out of the work zone, let's review what we learned, right? So Libras, right? Mars and Libra. Mars doesn't like Libra and puts it in the space where it's actually needing to relate to somebody and looks for external individuals to support itself in its endeavors, intentions, and motivations, right? We also learned that Libra and the relationship energy can be much more than actually relating to a person, so it's a person, place, or thing that you're always relating to. We learned that doing this and realizing that Mars having its lens in Libra realizes that it externalizes its intentions and the stewardship of those intentions and motivations. So you're putting your motivations and life force in the hands of others, which is something Mars doesn't like, but it can work with because, you know, when it's in relationships, everything can be lovey-dovey and sweet. You can live a life of peace and prosperity if you so choose to, even with this energy, regardless of how Mars feels about it. Now, with this being the case, through that you may have learned a lot about interpersonal relationships and sociology and a lot about people, right? And you may use that from time to time to be an excuse for you actually experience something on your own and being like, "Aha, I'm a little smarter than you, I know more about you than you." And then as long as people don't say, "Hey, no, you don't actually do anything yourself. What are you talking about, mister?" And stuff like that, right? You've actually gone through that, you've experienced that, you learned a lot, and you know how to kind of talk your way around not experiencing things for yourself at times. It is what it is. Don't lie. Just don't always admit it to the wrong people. You know what I'm saying? And now off of that, we bounced all the way through the lamentation process and a little bit about that and how you can avoid it, and bringing it back to the actual noun, the person, place, or things, and finding something that you can consistently relate to in a broad basis, because creating an individual relationship for each intention and experience that you have is not always the best move, especially with time. And essentially that led us all the way back to here where we reviewed everything. So with that being the case, you can always rewatch this. This lives on infinitely, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.